Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be talking about what I used to gig with for my old band. Stick with it. So guys, as you can tell, I'm a little under the weather today. My throat's sore. I have this weird new sickness that's going around and it's not fun. But anyway, so things I used to tour with, my old band One Star Gone. One Star Gone is no longer together anymore. Nothing personal against those guys. Just our schedules didn't mesh, so getting to practices together were really hard and just didn't work out. So let's talk about basses, all right? I was the bass player of One Star Gone, and I started off playing this Squire Vintage Modified 70s jazz bass. And that bass served me very well for that band. Very punchy bass, cut through very well. We had two guitar players and a drummer, and that thing worked out great. Then later on I decided, I wasn't really digging that sound. I wasn't really digging the scooped sound that a jazz bass has, so I decided, you know what, I'd go with the more flatter sound, more classic sound of a bass. Then I decided I'd try out. This right here is a Cort Action PJ bass, which I put a, as you can tell, it's been beat the crap out of, because this was the #1 bass in that band, and I have a Seymour Duncan quarter pounder, and I just have the stock jazz bass pickup in it. Even though the stock jazz bass pickup is a little thin, the quarter pounder works really nice though, because it gives that rounded out punk rocky punch that you need if you're going to be in a pop punk band or any style of punk band. Now let's talk about my latest and greatest bass, the one that I got later on, and I used for a couple specific songs. So guys, I decided to sit down because it makes doing all the hand actions and stuff much nicer. Here is my Stormtrooper bass. This was the next #1 bass for One Star Gone. It's a 5-string. And judging by this headstock, you're probably not going to be able to tell what it is. It's a Fender MB5 Japanese-made bass. Fender made in Japan bass. This is the hottest jazz bass I think I've ever played. Ridiculously low action. To be honest, it used to hear that little buzz. It buzzes when you play it acoustically, but it doesn't when you play it through an amp. And I'm okay with that, as long as it comes out of the amp sounding good. At the end of the day, that's what I'm okay with. You don't get any of the buzz to the amp. You just get all the thick tones, and sounds great in my opinion. So I'm going to use this guy, maybe the Cort, to demo some of the other stuff that we're doing here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about my pedal board. So let's get to that. So guys, talking about my pedal board here. It's just the mini bone by Gator is the board itself. I only use 3 pedals in this band, so it works out pretty nice. I have a Behringer tuner. It's not the best quality tuner, but it'll do the job. 25 bucks, cheap pedal, definitely recommend it. And the reason why I spent less money on a tuner is because even though some tuners aren't the same, as long as it gets my bass in tune with everyone else, it's all that really matters to me. I don't need to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars buying a bunch of pedals. Now, next is the Seymour Duncan Studio Bass Compression Pedal. Beautiful compressor, beautiful. And I'm sorry about the squealing that you can hear. It's actually the stool that I'm sitting on right now. I need to get it replaced. It's just an old drummer stool, and works pretty good for the practice room, if I do say so myself. So I have the compression level on this pedal almost all the way up, if you can see. Here, right there, the compression's almost all the way up. The attack is about middle. The blend knob is pretty far. It's about at 2 o'clock, and the level's about at 12 because I don't want to push. I don't want to have to put out more level than I have to. Also, the last thing I have is a MXR micro amp and at the end of the signal chain, and this is just because we used to play one song that had a bass and drums were the only instruments playing during the verse, and I'd just throw in the micro amp to thicken it up, maybe get a little bit of a push the amp just a little bit. Yeah, this isn't fun, this cold, but anyway, I also used it for, we did a slap bass song, and what I'd do is I'd roll it down a little bit. I just roll it down a little bit, try to keep the, just to thicken it up a little bit, and, you know, other than that, that's about it. So, yeah, pretty awesome pedal board. Next thing we're going to talk about is the amps. I used 2 different amps for one Stargone. For practices and everything else, I used a Rumble 40, which, if you the old Rumble 40, not the studio Rumbles that they have out now. It's not the modeling amp; it's just your solid state bass amp, which sounded killer. Oh, sorry about that, but so much punch, so much punch. Beautiful amp, beautiful amp. Highly recommend the Rumble series, even a Rumble 100. Only thing I didn't like about the Rumble 100 is it wasn't the Rumble 100 1x15 speaker wise, and I think that a 15-inch speaker for bass kind of makes it sound more flubby. 12 is about my max I'll go on bass, which you'll find out later on when I start talking about the next amp. Next amp is a Fender 100 bass amp, just a 1980s style bass amp. Has a lot of, it gets slightly distorted as you go to those lower frequencies, which I kind of like. And it's just a great amp, honestly. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just a standard amp. And as far as the cabinet goes, I'm rocking a PV 2x10 cab. I can't remember the exact name of it, but the PV cab sounds amazing. And I bought both of the amp head and the cab, both secondhand, and I just use that for live stuff. Usually, push the amp a little bit through the 10-inch speaker. Sounds killer. The Rumble 40 I used when we went into the studio once. We never actually released any music, but when we went to the studio, and we did like studio kind of had us do like a little walkthrough, playthrough type thing, and I used the Rumble 40. The Rumble 40 is great. It has a DI out, which definitely helps with studio stuff, so you're not dealing with all the crap that comes with studio. As far as having to mic up a cab or mic up an amp, just great sounding amp. I can't speak enough of my love for the Rumble 40 and the Rumble series in general. So, yeah, pretty much it. I might do probably do a sound demo of some stuff. Definitely, just to give you guys a little bit of a taste of the sound we were kind of going for. So what I'm going to do for the sound is I'm going to go old school, and I'm going to, not old school, but like, I'm going to use the Cort PJ bass, this brown guy right here, which is awesome $100 bass. I'm going to use him through the pedal board into the 100 bass, and see how it sounds. So guys, the bass just going through the 100 bassman sounds something like this. And that's without the limiter switch on in the bassman. Because the bassman has a limiter switch, which is kind of like a natural compression that the amp does itself. Now, if I were to throw that on, let me just do that quick. The limiter sounds something like this. And all it does is just give a little bit of compression, not a whole lot. Gives a little bit of compression for higher pitched stuff, flibbly flams you're going to do. The tuner, with the tuner on, it sounds like this. Turns out my E string was slightly out of tune. Probably should have tuned that before I even started up. But with the so once more, this is just the bass of the amp. Now I throw in the compressor. And that's with just the compressor on. Now, for songs where I need the micro amp to kind of give it a little bit of a push, all that's doing is slightly distorting the signal and filling it out, making it more round. I also sometimes I would roll it back and kind of just give it a little bit of a micro amp sound. Now this is without the micro amp. It just kind of sounds a little weak, but you add the micro amp in, it just... And if you can tell, the compressor adds a little bit of volume. So I leave the amp naturally down a little bit more. That way when I turn on the compressor, it doesn't blow everyone's eardrums out. Even though I do leave the compressor on usually, just most of the time. I highly recommend if you're a bass player, you just have a small pedal board. Tuner is definitely a necessity. Great to do in between songs because it mutes your signal. And I recommend getting a tuner that mutes your signal when you tune, because hearing someone go it's just boring. It's just boring and dumb, and it's annoying to everyone involved. But when you have the tuner on, I can fling on this thing pretty loud. But when I'm on stage, you're not going to hear that. But of course, when it's going through the amp, you're obviously going to hear it. And I recommend everyone get a compressor if you're a bass player. Just because even if you're playing jazz, a compressor is kind of necessary. Turn down the attack a little bit, and you can get... or if you're playing something more like bossa nova style. Just a compressor is very, very useful pedal. micro amp. That was just because it's what we wanted to do as a band. We thought it was the right step. You might think something else. Maybe you throw a lot of chorus on. Maybe get a chorus. Or you'll get a fuzz or an overdrive or something cool. Or maybe your amp has an overdrive channel like the Rumble does, and you don't need one. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.